You heard what I said before about the announcement today from AGL in relation to the Loy Yang power station in Victoria and the cost it will be to the grid in that state. It'll also cost AGL $20 billion and it'll cost 600 workers their jobs. It'll also hit the Latrobe Valley even harder. Like the Hunter Valley, they've suffered with these coal-fired power stations closing. And it also comes less than 24 hours after the announcement yesterday from the Queensland Premier. They'll spend $62 billion that they don't have to get rid of coal by 2035 and build the world's largest pumped hydro scheme. Well, so they say. And more details from her too today, announcing Queensland will legislate a 70% renewable energy target by 2032. Joining me now, former Resources Minister, Queensland Senator Matt Canavan. Matt, we'll start, if we can, AGL. I've gone through a bit of the detail with my viewers now, but how bad is what we've seen the company announce today?
Well, it's the big unanswered question for us all, Peter, is this going to keep the lights on? And I fear here what seems to be happening is AGL is designing its future plans for electricity based on some loud shareholders of itself, not on what is best for the long-suffering Australian electricity consumer and or the need for us to keep our manufacturing industry. There doesn't seem to be a lot of planning here because, Peter, just earlier this year, the AGL did actually update with the energy regulator its plans for Loy Yang, and it said it would shut it in 2044. That was in February 22nd they did that, just a few weeks before Russia invaded Ukraine. And now 6 months later, with coal prices surging around the world, with clearly a lack of energy existing in Europe because of their lack of coal-fired power, the German Greens Party reopening coal-fired power stations, they now are going to bring forward the shutting of a coal-fired power station here in Australia by 10 years or so. That to me doesn't sound like it's based on any engineering or economics. It sounds to me it's a response to a pressure campaign, and that should put a lot of fear into us all.
Yeah, it's just on that point though, the cynic in me says that we're watching what's happening play out in Europe. The world is watching the experiment in Europe on renewable energy basically bite them on the backside now that they've got this issue with gas. And the problem of renewables and this issue that Europe is going through right now long predates what's happening in Ukraine.
That's right.
Is there a concern that the Green zealots are worried that we will wake up, watching what's happening in Europe, that we will wake up to the madness of this renewables drive at the expense of everything else when we haven't got anything to replace yet the lost base load? We're not prepared to go into nuclear. Are they worried perhaps that we might all, wake up and say the emperor's got no clothes and then want this reverse? So they decided, let's bring on these closures, let's bring them forward, in this case by a decade, at least people wake up, lest they wake up.
There's no doubt about that, Peter, and you can also see that with the legislation trying to lock in targets and lock in future parliaments. They are very, very scared that, and I think they know deep down that the consequences of their actions are going to mean higher prices, and there'll be a political backlash from that. So they're seeking to lock us in as closely as we can. And when you look here, I'll take a different approach and look where we agree, or where I agree with the Greens and particularly the Labor Party, the new Labor government. I agree that we have an energy crisis right now in this country. The Labor Party, if you listen to their rhetoric, is that they're blaming that crisis on the fact that the coalition government had multiple energy policies and there were these things called the climate wars happening last decade. That's their excuse for Australia's energy crisis. The thing they never mentioned, though, is hang on, Europe's also in an energy crisis right now. And I was part of the government, but I don't think we had enough power that our energy policies here in this country actually generated their crisis. Perhaps there's another common denominator between Europe and Australia that explains both symptoms.
That is such a good point.
The investment in renewable energy. That's the common thing that we've both done. We've both massively increased investment in solar and wind in Europe and Australia, and we're left with not enough power and high prices.
Yeah, well, that's a perfectly well-made point, because Europe drank the Kool-Aid. Europe has done everything the UN has demanded and more, and they're in this trouble. So you can't extrapolate then the terrible old coalition government for 10 years has caused this problem when Europe did everything the Greens told them to do, and they're in a terrible, terrible position, as we know. Talk to me about coal in Queensland. You are a coal mining state. Anastasia Palaszczuk's now officially made coal like kryptonite in Queensland. How can you be so stupid?
Again, I think there's a response here to political pressure campaigns. The fact that the Greens won a few seats in Brisbane has got the Labor Party spooked, and they're trying to jump at shadows now. And it's very, very disappointing that we seem to be beset with a series of governments that are constantly jumping to and fro based on polls or PR campaigns. And look, there was elements of the former coalition government that did that. Our country is desperately crying out for leadership, and what we've seen from the Queensland government this week is definitely not leadership, because we can all see we do not have enough reliable power. I mean, the fig leaf of these pumped hydro dams that the Premier has announced is just laughable. She kind of does know she can't just come out and do the old thing and announce wind turbines and solar panels. They have to have what they sort of call now in the jargon firming power. And so she's announced these pumped hydros. But I live near these dam sites. No one's ever heard of them. no one's ever heard of these proposals. They've literally been pulled out of their backside. And they're going to spend apparently $60 billion
Labor
on
and
these
dams.
things.
I mean,
like without even thinking about it.
Labor,
this is insanity on stilts.
Labor having a conversion about dams, I mean, please, we are not that silly. And we know the issues with Snow 2.0, Malcolm Turnbull's boondoggle. I mean, it is literally billions and billions of dollars over budget. It's long overdue in terms of the timeframes it's met. And at best, we're talking about 500,000 homes only that'll be powered by. Talk to me about this gas announcement today from the Federal Resources Minister, Madeleine King. What's it all mean?
Well, look, I hope it's progress, but it is disappointing that the Labor government spent months flailing around and whinging and complaining about the domestic gas security mechanism that we put in place. I was actually the minister who put it in place, and they said it would take too long and it didn't work. And now, surprise, surprise, they've used the threat of using our very mechanism to conclude this agreement. So, look, I do welcome it. We're desperately short of gas in Eastern Australia, and we should use the gas that is produced in Australia, should be used for Australians first. We should be able to secure our own needs first. So hopefully this agreement is watertight and this gas will be delivered. But it doesn't, in the long term, take away the need for us to actually produce gas again. And drawing that comparison again to Europe, it's amazing to see the UK government do such a U-turn on fracking in the United Kingdom. They've been religiously opposed to fracking there in the United Kingdom. It's been in their laws, and now the Conservative Party has just completely backflipped in the face of this unfolding crisis and is desperately trying to get the wells out, get drilling as quickly as possible. And we've got that same situation here where the Victorian government has put a fracking ban in your state there, Peters, in their constitution. So their constitution is sort of habeas corpus, equality before the law, and no fracking.
Yes.
I mean, it's so absurd.
Correct.
And hopefully,
150 years of history, and then fracking goes in.
That's crazy.
Hey, just quickly before we go, your private senator's bill on nuclear energy, bravo on that, into the parliament this week. Are your colleagues in the coalition going to support you?
I think there's a lot of momentum building, Peter. I've got 9 colleagues who have signed up to this. That's this bill, this nuclear bill. It's the largest parliamentary support ever since the ban was introduced 25 years ago. And I do think the momentum with the public is building. I do think I've got a lot of colleagues supporting me, but they'll be helped if your viewers contact them. Tell them to do it. Let's get on with it. We've got the largest uranium reserves in the world, and we're the only settled continent in the world without a nuclear reactor.
Spot on. www.aph.gov.au. APH for Australian Parliament House. You'll find all their addresses. You can divide them by state, by party, hit the phone, send them emails. I'm telling you, that's right. People pressure is the only stuff that matters, particularly in opposition. Matt Canavan, thank you for your time.